The Galactic Council's education program had been running for 3 years when Danny Sullivan became the first human accepted into the Zephyron Institute. He was 22 years old and excited to prove that humans belonged among the stars. The institute floated in space around a giant planet called Kelvor Prime. It was huge, made of crystal domes and special gravity fields. Over 10,000 students from 47 different alien species studied there. Danny spent his first month getting used to everything. The gravity was lighter than Earth. The air had a copper color to it. Other students stared at him because they had never seen a human before. His roommate was an alien named Kex. Kex had 6 arms and see-through skin. He studied quantum mechanics and thought Danny's need for privacy was strange. He also found human food very weird. The best part of the institute was the Xenobiology Research Division. It was located in the lower levels of the station. The most dangerous and interesting creatures from across the galaxy were kept there for scientists to study. Danny heard rumors from other students about what was down there. They whispered about creatures that could walk through walls. They talked about organisms that ate radiation. They mentioned predators so fierce that they needed military-level cages to hold them. His xenobiology professor was a stern alien named Vexnor. During the first week, Vexnor made it very clear that first-year students were not allowed in the research division. Danny had no plans to break that rule. Then Lisa Hayes walked into his advanced chemistry class. Lisa was the second human to arrive at the institute. She transferred from the Mars Colonial Academy. She had bright green eyes and was curious about everything. She and Danny became friends immediately. Being the only 2 humans on the station brought them together. They understood the same jokes. They missed the same things about home. They faced the same challenges of being human in an alien world. One evening, they were studying in the common area. Lisa looked up from her datapad with excitement in her eyes. She told Danny that she overheard 2 graduate students talking about a Draxian Night Stalker in Sublevel 9. She said it was one of only 3 in captivity anywhere in the galaxy. Danny looked up from his work. He thought Draxian Night Stalkers were extinct. Lisa corrected him. She said they were nearly extinct. This one was captured during a raid on a mining colony about 5 years ago. It killed 17 people before they managed to drug it and put it to sleep. The way Lisa talked about it made Danny nervous. But her eyes were bright with fascination, not fear. That was Lisa. She was fearless, sometimes too much so. She was brilliant but also arrogant about it. She could never leave a mystery alone. 2 weeks later, she convinced Danny to sneak into the research division with her. They went during the sleep cycle when most of the station was resting. Lisa promised they would just take a quick look. She said they would not touch anything. She just wanted to see what creatures they were keeping down there. Danny's brain told him to turn back. Every instinct said this was a bad idea. But he followed Lisa anyway. The security systems in this section were surprisingly easy to get past. Probably nobody expected students to be stupid enough to come this far down. The research division was like walking through a nightmare. There were transparent cages everywhere. Each one held a creature that seemed impossible. They passed tanks full of glowing serpents. They saw cages with insect creatures the size of horses. They walked by sealed rooms where things moved in the shadows. Lisa stopped and pointed to a massive cage at the end of the corridor. She whispered that this was it. This was the Draxian Night Stalker. The creature was more terrifying than Danny imagined. It stood almost 3 meters tall. Its body was covered in midnight black fur. It had muscles built for speed and power. 4 arms ending in sharp claws flexed as it walked back and forth in its cage. Its head looked almost like a dog, but wrong in ways Danny could not explain. It had 6 eyes arranged in 2 rows. Its mouth was full of teeth designed for tearing flesh. Lisa pressed closer to the clear barrier. She breathed the word beautiful. Then the station's alarm started screaming. A voice came over the speakers. It said there was a containment breach in progress. Sublevel 9, Section 7. This was not a drill. Danny felt his blood turn to ice. Section 7. They were in Section 7 right now. The emergency lights turned on, making everything red. Somewhere close by, metal screamed and something roared with animal fury. Lisa grabbed Danny's arm. Her earlier confidence was gone now. She said they needed to move immediately. They ran. The corridors that seemed simple before now twisted and turned like a maze. Behind them, the sounds of chaos grew louder. Explosions echoed. Someone screamed. Under it all was a rhythmic pounding like footsteps from something huge. They turned a corner and stopped dead. A creature blocked their path. It looked like a living mass of tentacles and teeth. It must have escaped from one of the other cages. It turned toward them with a sound like breaking glass. Danny pulled Lisa backward, but there was nowhere to go. The creature lunged forward at them. Then the Draxian Night Stalker was there. It moved faster than Danny could see. It was a blur of black fur and violence. It crashed into the tentacle creature with massive force. The two aliens rolled across the floor fighting. The Night Stalker's claws tore through flesh. Its jaws bit down hard. Within seconds, the tentacle creature was dead and still. Danny expected the Night Stalker to attack them next. Instead, it just stood there. All six eyes looked at Danny and Lisa. Blood dripped from its mouth. Its chest moved up and down with heavy breaths. Then slowly, very deliberately, it moved between them and the corridor. More sounds of chaos echoed from that direction. The Night Stalker positioned itself like a wall between the humans and whatever else had escaped. Lisa's hand squeezed Danny's so hard it hurt. She said she thought it just protected them. Danny could not speak. He just stared at the massive predator standing guard. Everything he learned said Draxian Night Stalkers were mindless killers. They attacked anything that moved. They showed no intelligence beyond basic hunting instincts, yet this one had saved them. This one was protecting them. Nothing made sense anymore. But as another roar echoed through the corridors, Danny realized that understanding could wait. Right now, they needed to survive. And somehow, impossibly, their best chance at survival was the monster standing between them and death. The Draxian Night Stalker stood perfectly still. It was a living wall between the two humans and whatever else had broken free. Danny's mind raced trying to understand what was happening. Everything he read about Draxian Night Stalkers said they were killing machines. They were apex predators that attacked anything with a heartbeat. They showed no mercy and no intelligence beyond basic animal cunning. Yet this one had saved them. This one was protecting them. Lisa whispered Danny's name. She asked what they should do. Before Danny could answer, another creature burst into view. This one was covered in hard armor like a shell. It had snapping jaws that looked like they could cut through steel. It made a screaming sound when it saw them. The noise made Danny's ears ring with pain. The Night Stalker moved instantly. It charged forward with a deep roar. It met the armored creature head-on. The impact when they collided shook the floor under Danny's feet. Claws scraped against the hard shell. Teeth looked for weak spots in the armor. The Night Stalker fought with savage intelligence. It used all four arms to grab and tear. Its powerful legs drove it forward with incredible strength. The armored creature did not stand a chance. Within moments, it was dead. Blue liquid leaked from its body across the floor. Danny said they should run while it was distracted, but even as he spoke, he knew they would not make it far. The corridors were full of escaped creatures. He and Lisa had no weapons. They had no armor. They had no way to defend themselves against the monsters prowling the research division. The Night Stalker turned back to face them. Its six eyes studied them with an intelligence that made Danny's skin crawl. Then, impossibly, it made a sound that was almost like a word. It was a rumbling vocalization that echoed in the hallway. The sound was clear. Stay. Lisa's eyes went wide. She asked if it just spoke to them. Danny remembered a lecture from weeks ago. He said Draxians can copy sounds they hear, but they were not supposed to be smart enough to use language in the right context. They could mimic but not understand. The Night Stalker made a huffing sound. It might have been amusement or frustration. Then it moved to the nearest wall terminal. Using one clawed finger with surprising care, it began touching the controls. A holographic map appeared in the air. It showed the layout of the station. It displayed the locations of escaped creatures throughout Sublevel 9. There were dozens of them spreading through the corridors like a plague, but the Night Stalker highlighted a specific route on the map. It was a path that led to an emergency evacuation point. Lisa said it wanted them to follow. Danny was not sure if he should be relieved or more terrified. They had no other choices, though. When the Night Stalker began moving down the corridor, they followed close behind. The journey through the research division became a nightmare. The Night Stalker led them through the chaos. It stopped only to kill threats that blocked their path. It fought with efficient brutality. It never wasted movement. It always kept itself between the humans and danger. They passed the body of a dead researcher. Then they saw two security guards who had not survived. The station's defensive systems had activated. Automated weapons tried to contain the breach. But it was clear the situation was out of control. Danny wondered out loud why the Night Stalker was helping them. Lisa suggested maybe it recognized them from earlier when they were near its cage. Or maybe it was following some territorial instinct. They were near its enclosure when everything went wrong. The Night Stalker returned from scouting ahead. It made that stay sound again. Then it pointed down the corridor to their right with one clawed hand. 3 more creatures were coming. They were moving together like a pack. The Night Stalker looked back at Danny and Lisa. For a moment, Danny could have sworn he saw something like concern in those alien eyes. Then it charged to meet the threat head-on. The battle was vicious and brutal. The Night Stalker was powerful and fast, but fighting 3 opponents at once pushed even its abilities to the limit. One creature managed to rake its claws across the Night Stalker's side. Dark blood began to flow. Another creature lunged for its throat. Danny did not think. He just acted. He grabbed a piece of debris from the floor. It was a jagged chunk of metal torn from a wall panel. He threw it with all his strength. It hit one of the creatures in the head. It was not hard enough to hurt it badly, but it was enough to distract it. The Night Stalker took advantage of the opening Danny created. Within seconds, all 3 threats were dead on the ground. The creature turned to face Danny. It was breathing hard. Blood matted its dark fur. Its 6 eyes met Danny's human ones. Danny felt something pass between them in that moment. Understanding, perhaps, or recognition of something deeper. The Night Stalker made a sound that might have been approval. Then it turned and continued forward. Danny and Lisa followed through the red-lit nightmare. A human student, his friend, and the monster that had decided to be their guardian walked together through hell. They passed more bodies. They avoided more fights when possible. The Night Stalker seemed to know which battles to take and which to avoid. It was thinking and planning. It was making strategic decisions to keep them safe. At one point, they had to crawl through a damaged section where the ceiling had partially collapsed. The Night Stalker went first. It tested the stability of the debris. Only when it was sure the path was safe did it signal for them to follow. Lisa whispered to Danny that this changed everything. If the Night Stalker was this intelligent, then everything they thought they knew about the species was wrong. They were not mindless beasts. They were people trapped in bodies that others feared. Danny agreed, but said they needed to focus on surviving first. They could worry about the implications later. The Night Stalker led them around another corner. The emergency evacuation point was close now. Danny could see the heavy blast doors at the end of the corridor. They were almost safe. Just a little further. That was when the biggest creature yet stepped into their path. It was massive, easily twice the size of the Night Stalker. Its body was covered in crystalline spikes that glowed with internal light. Its eyes burned with bioluminescent fury. The Night Stalker stopped. For the first time, Danny saw what might have been fear in its posture. This creature was beyond anything they had faced so far. This was a true apex predator, something that could kill the Night Stalker with ease. But when the crystal creature started forward, the Night Stalker did not run. It did not abandon the humans it had chosen to protect. Instead, it roared its defiance and prepared to fight. Danny realized in that moment that they were watching something extraordinary. The Night Stalker was willing to die for them. This creature that owed them nothing was ready to give its life to protect 2 humans it barely knew. The crystal creature charged. The Night Stalker met it head-on, and Danny knew he could not just stand there and watch their guardian die alone. The crystal creature hit the Night Stalker with enormous force. The impact sent the Night Stalker crashing into the wall. The sound of the collision was terrible. For a moment, Danny thought the Night Stalker was finished, but it pushed itself up on 3 legs, shaking its head to clear it. The crystal creature advanced slowly. It seemed to know it had already won. It raised one massive limb high to deliver a killing blow. The limb came down like a hammer. The Night Stalker rolled aside at the last second. The crystal limb struck the floor and cracked the metal plating. Sparks flew everywhere. The Night Stalker used the opening to strike back. Its claws found gaps in the crystal armor. Its teeth bit down on what might have been a joint, but the crystal creature was too strong. It shook the Night Stalker off like an annoying insect. The Night Stalker hit the opposite wall hard. More dark blood flowed from new wounds. It was losing this fight badly. Danny's eyes swept the corridor looking for anything that might help. His gaze landed on a damaged power conduit. Sparks shot from exposed cables in the wall. An idea formed in his mind. It was desperate and probably stupid, but it was all he had. He told Lisa that when he said go, she should kill the energy barriers in the corridor. Lisa looked at him like he was crazy. She said the crystal creature would escape if she did that. Danny said to trust him. Danny ran to the power conduit. Lisa shouted in alarm, but he ignored her. He grabbed at the exposed cables with shaking fingers. Electricity shocked him twice before he managed to reroute the power flow. The conduit began to make a high whining sound. It was building toward an overload. Danny yelled for Lisa to drop the barriers now. The energy barriers vanished. The crystal creature sensed freedom. It started to turn away from the Night Stalker toward the open corridor. Danny threw the overloaded conduit directly at the creature's legs with all his strength. The explosion was not large, but it was enough. The crystal creature stumbled and lost its balance. In that single moment of weakness, the Night Stalker struck. All four arms grabbed hold of the crystal creature. Claws found purchase in the weak joints of its armor. The Night Stalker's jaws clamped onto what passed for the creature's throat. With a savage twist and pull, the crystal creature fell and stopped moving. Silence filled the corridor. The only sounds were ragged breathing and distant chaos from other parts of the station. Smoke rose from the dead conduit. The smell of burned wiring filled the air. The Night Stalker slowly released the crystal creature. It turned to face Danny. It was covered in wounds. Blood leaked from a dozen places. It favored one leg heavily, but it was alive. Danny raised his hand slowly. He tried to look non-threatening. He asked if the Night Stalker was okay. The Night Stalker tilted its head. All six eyes focused on Danny with that unsettling intelligence. Then it did something Danny never expected to see. It lowered itself onto three legs. It kept one arm extended outward. Very gently, very carefully, it touched its clawed hand to Danny's chest. The touch was surprisingly gentle. The claws did not pierce his skin or clothes. The Night Stalker spoke again. This time the word was very clear. Mine. Then it said protect. Then it repeated mine. Lisa's voice shook when she spoke. She said she thought it just claimed Danny as its own. Danny asked what that meant. Lisa's academic brain kicked in, even surrounded by all the chaos and death. She said Draxian's social structures were based on pack bonds. She read a research paper once. Draxians were pack predators in the wild. They formed deep bonds with specific individuals they considered worth protecting. Usually these were family members, but sometimes they bonded with beings outside their species. This happened if they perceived a debt or felt a strong connection. Lisa continued explaining. She said Danny saved the Night Stalker earlier when he distracted that first creature, and just now Danny helped it again with the power conduit. She thought the Night Stalker saw Danny as part of its pack now. It had claimed him as family. The Night Stalker made a rumbling sound that seemed like agreement. Its hand remained on Danny's chest for another moment. Then it withdrew and began limping toward the bunker entrance. It spoke again. Shelter. Rest. They followed it inside the emergency bunker. Danny sealed the heavy blast doors behind them. The doors were designed to withstand explosive decompression from space. That meant they could also keep out anything short of military weapons. If they could just stay inside and wait, they would be safe until rescue teams arrived. The bunker was small but well stocked. It had emergency supplies, medical equipment, and communication systems. The first thing Danny tried was contacting station security, but all communication channels were jammed with emergency traffic. Everyone was trying to call for help at once. Lisa immediately began treating the Night Stalker's wounds. She approached the massive predator with remarkable calm. To Danny's surprise, it allowed her to work on it. It sat still while she cleaned deep cuts and applied synthetic tissue patches from the medical kit. Lisa talked while she worked, mostly to herself. She said Draxian biology was similar enough to Earth-based life that the medical patches should help. The real question was how the Night Stalker survived this long. Some of these wounds should have been fatal to most creatures. The Night Stalker watched her work with obvious curiosity. When Lisa finished bandaging one particularly deep cut, it made a sound like a purr. It gently patted her head with one massive hand. The gesture was surprisingly tender. Danny said he thought it liked her. Lisa smiled despite everything they had been through. Then her expression turned serious. She said when this was over, the authorities would want to take the Night Stalker back. They would put it in a cage again. Danny looked at the Night Stalker. He looked at this creature that protected them and fought for them and bled for them. The idea of it spending the rest of its life locked in containment suddenly felt unbearably wrong. It felt like a crime. Danny said quietly that they would need to figure something else out then. The Night Stalker's eyes met his. Danny could have sworn it understood every word he spoke. They spent 6 hours in that bunker before station security finally regained control. 6 hours during which Danny learned more about the Night Stalker than any scientist had probably ever documented. Its name was difficult to pronounce. It was a series of growls and clicks that Danny's human vocal cords could not make, so they settled on calling it Shade. The Night Stalker seemed to accept this name with what Danny was learning to read as amused tolerance. Shade could understand far more language than it could speak. It responded appropriately to complex questions even when its answers were limited to single words and hand gestures. It was curious about human bodies. It gently examined Danny's hands with fascination. It marveled at his opposable thumbs. It found Lisa's hair interesting, carefully running one claw through the strands with surprising delicacy. Most importantly, Shade was protective of them. When proximity alarms indicated something moving outside the bunker, Shade immediately positioned itself in front of the humans. All 4 arms were ready to fight despite its injuries and exhaustion. Danny asked at one point how long Shade was kept in that cage. Shade held up 2 hands. It opened and closed them multiple times. The gesture was clear enough. Too many years to count easily. At least 5 or 6 years minimum. Lisa said softly that keeping something this intelligent locked up for study was cruel. It was wrong. Shade was not an animal to be examined. Shade was a person trapped in a cage. When security finally breached the bunker doors, they came in with weapons drawn and ready. They froze at the sight that greeted them. 2 human students were sitting calmly with medical supplies scattered around. A Draxian Night Stalker lay between them like a guard dog. Its eyes tracked every armed guard with predatory focus and obvious threat assessment. Danny stood up quickly with his hands visible. He said nobody should shoot. He said Shade was with them. Shade protected them through the entire breach event. The security chief was a huge alien named Krell. He looked skeptical and suspicious. He said that creature killed 6 security personnel during its escape from containment. Lisa stood up beside Danny. She countered the security chief's accusation with heat in her voice. She said that creature fought off at least 20 escaped specimens to keep them alive. They would not be standing here without Shade's protection. Shade rumbled a low warning as the guards advanced with their weapons still raised. Danny felt his heart sink into his stomach. This was going to end badly if they could not calm the situation down quickly. A new voice cut through the tension. Professor Vexnor pushed through the security team. His alien features were hard to read, but his tone was authoritative. He ordered the guards to lower their weapons immediately. The security chief protested. He said the creature was dangerous and needed to be restrained. Professor Vexnor turned his gaze on the chief. He said that creature was one of the most valuable research specimens in the galaxy. These students were alive because of its actions. Vexnor's eyes swept over the scene, taking in the bloodstains, the makeshift bandages, and Shade's protective posture. The professor said they could discuss why Sullivan and Hayes were in the research division later. Right now he wanted to understand what happened during the breach, so Danny and Lisa told him everything. They described the escape and the chaos. They explained how Shade protected them and showed intelligence. Lisa pulled out her datapad and showed him readings she had taken. She had documented Shade's behavior and language use throughout their ordeal. Danny described how Shade led them to safety and fought to keep them alive. When they finished their account, Professor Vexnor was silent for a long moment. He said this changed everything scientists thought they knew about Draxian intelligence. If what they were saying was true, it had profound implications. Danny interrupted him. He said it was true, every word, and there was something else that needed to be said. Shade could not go back in that cage. Vexnor said the creature was property of the Institute's research division. There were protocols and procedures that governed its containment. Danny's voice was firm when he spoke. He said the creature had a name. Shade had intelligence and agency. Keeping Shade imprisoned was morally wrong, and the professor knew it. Vexnor's expression showed he was troubled by the situation. He said even if he agreed personally, he did not have the authority to make that decision. The Galactic Council's Xenobiology Committee would need to review the case and make a ruling. Shade made a sound then. It was a low growl that silenced everyone in the corridor. Then Shade moved slowly and deliberately until it stood directly behind Danny. One massive hand rested on Danny's shoulder like a statement of intent. Shade spoke clearly. Enough for everyone to hear. Pack, protect. The message could not have been more clear. Shade had chosen where its loyalty lay. It was not going back to captivity willingly. Anyone who tried to cage it again would have to go through it first. The standoff lasted another tense minute. Guards shifted nervously. Weapons remained half-raised. Then Chief Krell sighed heavily. He said this situation was above his security clearance and pay grade. He asked the professor what he recommended. Vexnor thought for a moment before deciding. He said temporary quarters under observation for all three of them together. They would stay that way until the council could convene and determine the proper course of action. He looked at Danny and Lisa sternly. He said they were both facing disciplinary hearings for unauthorized access to restricted areas. Lisa said it was worth it without hesitation. Danny nodded his agreement. Getting in trouble was a small price to pay for Shade's freedom and their lives. They were escorted to a secure residential unit. It was much larger than standard student quarters. It came equipped with monitoring systems and cameras. Shade had to duck low to fit through the doorways. But once inside, Shade immediately began investigating every corner with obvious curiosity and interest. Over the next 3 days, station repairs continued. The council debated what to do about the unprecedented situation. During that time, something remarkable began to happen. Word spread quickly about the human students and their Draxian guardian. Other students came to visit, initially just curious but quickly becoming fascinated. Shade was patient with all the visitors. It allowed them to ask questions through Danny and Lisa. It permitted them to take sensor scans for their studies. But Shade always stayed close to Danny and Lisa. It never let them out of its sight for long. Shade learned new words with impressive speed. Its vocabulary expanded daily. It showed clear preferences for certain foods over others. It enjoyed logic puzzles that Lisa brought from the recreation center. It could beat Danny at strategy games more often than not. Every day it became more clear that Shade was not an animal. Shade was a person who had been treated like a thing. One evening they sat together while Shade worked on a complex 3-dimensional puzzle. Lisa said quietly that they both realized what this meant. If Shade was this intelligent, there might be others like it. They could be looking at the discovery of a new sentient species that everyone thought were just beasts. Danny added grimly that it was a species humans nearly hunted to extinction. During Earth's colonial expansion into space, Draxians were classified as dangerous fauna. They were eliminated wherever human settlers encountered them. Thousands were killed without question or mercy. Shade's hands paused on the puzzle pieces, its 6 eyes fixed on Danny with an expression he could not quite read. There was something in that look. Pain, maybe, or old grief for losses that could never be recovered. Danny felt terrible. He said he was sorry. His people did that to Shade's species. It was wrong and cruel and based on fear and ignorance. Shade considered this for a long moment. Then it made a dismissive gesture with one hand. It spoke simply, "Past, you different pack." It was forgiveness, Danny realized, or perhaps something deeper than forgiveness. It was recognition that individuals could be better than their species' history, that Danny was not responsible for what other humans did before he was born, that what mattered was who he chose to be now. On the 4th day, Professor Vexnor returned with news. His expression was difficult to read. He said the council had reached a decision about Shade's status and future. Danny felt his stomach twist with anxiety. Lisa reached over and grabbed his hand. Shade moved closer to them both, sensing their tension and worry. Vexnor explained that the council had been debating for days. There were many competing interests and concerns to balance. The Institute's administration wanted continued containment and study. They argued that Shade was rare and valuable. Releasing it could set a dangerous precedent that might endanger research throughout the galaxy. Other council members argued that intelligence negated property rights. If Shade could demonstrate reasoning and language and self-determination, then holding it against its will was the same as slavery. And slavery was banned under Galactic Council law across all member species. Still others worried about public safety. Draxians were apex predators with a history of violence. Could they really release one onto a civilian station with thousands of students? The debate had gone back and forth. Legal precedents were cited. Ethical arguments were made. Security concerns were raised and discussed. Finally, the council had come to a conclusion. Vexnor said the hearing would be tomorrow in the main council chambers. Danny and Lisa would need to give testimony again. Shade would be evaluated by council representatives. The decision would be final and binding. That night, Danny could not sleep. He lay in his bunk staring at the ceiling while worry ate at him. What if the council decided to lock Shade away again? What if they determined it was too dangerous to be free? Shade had saved their lives. Shade had shown more loyalty and courage than most sentient beings Danny had ever met. The idea of it going back to that cage made him feel sick. A soft sound made him look over. Shade was awake too, sitting in the corner that had become its favorite spot. In the dim light, its 6 eyes reflected with an eerie glow. Danny got up and walked over. He asked if Shade was worried about tomorrow. Shade tilted its head in that characteristic way. It spoke quietly. Free or cage? You tried. Pack tried. More than before, grateful. Danny felt his throat tighten with emotion. He said they were not giving up. They would fight for Shade's freedom no matter what it took. Shade reached out and very gently touched Danny's face with one clawed finger. The gesture was tender and trusting. Then it spoke again with more words than it usually used at once. You good human. Heart good. If cage again, remember you. Remember Pack. Remember free days. Better than never free. Danny had to turn away so Shade would not see the tears in his eyes. He promised himself that he would not let it come to that. Somehow, some way, he would make sure Shade stayed free. Even if he had to fight the entire Galactic Council to do it. Tomorrow would decide everything. Tomorrow would determine if the galaxy was ready to recognize that Draxians were people, not monsters. Tomorrow would show if justice and compassion could overcome fear and tradition. Danny just hoped it would be enough. For Shade's sake and for the sake of any other Draxians still locked in cages across the galaxy, he hoped the council would make the right choice. Lisa stirred in her bunk and sat up. She asked if anyone else could not sleep. Danny and Shade both made sounds of agreement. So they sat together in the quiet darkness, the 3 members of an impossible. The council chambers on Kelvor Prime Station were designed to hold representatives from dozens of different species. It was a vast circular room with atmospheric controls that could shift between different environments as needed. Danny and Lisa sat in the section designated for oxygen-breathing species. The air was rich and easy to breathe. Shade waited in an adjacent chamber designed for larger beings. The proceeding had been going on for 2 hours. Danny was ready to climb the walls with nervous tension. His leg bounced up and down without him realizing it. Lisa kept checking her datapad even though there was nothing new to see on it. The debate centered on a question that seemed simple on the surface, but was anything but. Was Shade property, specimen, or person? Each word carried massive implications. The Institute's administration presented their case first. They argued for continued containment and study. They said the Draxian Night Stalker was incredibly rare and scientifically valuable. There were only 3 known specimens in captivity anywhere in the galaxy. Releasing Shade would set a precedent that could endanger research programs throughout known space. They had invested years and enormous resources into studying Shade. That investment would be wasted if Shade was released. A Calathian representative on the council countered their arguments strongly. She said that intelligence erased any claim of property rights. If Shade could demonstrate reasoning and language and self-determination, then holding it against its will was equivalent to slavery. Slavery was banned under Galactic Council law. There were no exceptions to this rule regardless of species. The Broxian counselor raised concerns about public safety next. He pointed out that Draxians were apex predators with a documented history of violence. Shade itself had killed during the containment breach, even if those killings were in defense of the humans. Could they really release a creature like that onto a civilian station with thousands of innocent students? What if something triggered its predatory instincts? What if it hurt someone? The debate went back and forth like this for what felt like hours. Legal precedents from dozens of cases were cited. Ethical arguments were made from multiple philosophical traditions. Security experts presented risk assessments and statistical models. Scientists discussed cognitive testing and intelligence benchmarks. Danny had given his testimony earlier in the proceedings. He described everything that happened during the breach in careful detail. He explained how Shade protected them and showed clear intelligence and decision-making ability. Lisa presented her research data and recordings. She had documented Shade's behavior throughout their ordeal in the days after. Even Professor Vexnor had spoken on Shade's behalf. His scientific objectivity forced him to acknowledge what the evidence clearly showed. But would it be enough? Danny was not sure. Some council members seemed sympathetic. Others seemed deeply skeptical. A few appeared to have already made up their minds before the hearing even began. Finally, the council chair called for order. She was an ancient being from a species called the Quelians. Her people had helped found the galactic community thousands of years ago. She was respected by all. The chair said the council had reviewed all testimony and examined all data. They had consulted their legal scholars and ethics boards. They were ready to render judgment on 3 connected matters. The chamber fell completely silent. Danny could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Lisa's hand found his and squeezed tight. The chair spoke in a clear voice that carried through the entire chamber. First, she said regarding the status of the Draxian known as Shade. This council found sufficient evidence of sapient intelligence to grant provisional personhood under galactic law. Shade was not property. Shade was not a specimen to be studied against its will. Shade was an individual with rights. Danny felt his heart leap with hope. Lisa made a small sound of joy. But the chair was not finished speaking. However, the chair continued, this decision could not be extended to the entire Draxian species without further study. They did not know if Shade represented typical Draxian intelligence or if Shade was an exceptional individual. The council charged the Institute with conducting ethical research to determine the cognitive abilities of Draxian Night Stalkers in general. Any specimens currently in captivity must be reassessed under these new standards immediately. That was good, Danny thought. That meant other Draxians might be freed too if they showed the same intelligence as Shade. Second, the chair said, regarding the matter of custody and supervision. While the council recognized Shade's personhood, they could not ignore legitimate security concerns. Shade had demonstrated violence during the breach, even if that violence was defensive in nature. Shade was still a powerful predator in a civilian environment. Danny felt dread start to creep in. Were they going to lock Shade up anyway despite declaring it a person? Therefore, the chair continued. This council assigned guardianship of Shade to Daniel Sullivan. Sullivan had demonstrated the ability to maintain a positive relationship with Shade. Sullivan would be legally responsible for Shade's actions and well-being. He must ensure that Shade did not pose a danger to others. He must facilitate Shade's integration into galactic society. Danny's jaw dropped open in shock. Guardianship? What did that mean exactly? The chair explained that it meant Danny was now legally responsible for Shade. Like a parent was responsible for a child, or a sponsor was responsible for an immigrant. This guardianship would remain in effect for a period of 2 years. At that point, it would be reassessed based on how well the arrangement worked. Someone in the gallery muttered that this was unprecedented in council history. The chair agreed it was unprecedented. But these were unprecedented circumstances. Sometimes unprecedented situations required unprecedented solutions. Third and finally, the chair said, regarding consequences for unauthorized access to restricted areas. Daniel Sullivan and Lisa Hayes were assigned 200 hours of community service. This service would be performed in the Institute's xenobiology department. Perhaps they could channel their obvious passion for xenobiology into more constructive and legal avenues. It was barely a punishment at all, Danny realized. Professor Vexnor must have argued for leniency on their behalf. The chair declared the council's judgment final. The hearing was adjourned. The chamber erupted into noise as representatives began talking and filing out. Danny sat frozen, trying to process what just happened. Shade was free. Shade was legally recognized as a person, and somehow, impossibly, Danny was now responsible for a 3-meter-tall apex predator. Lisa was grinning despite tears running down her face. She said congratulations and that Danny was now basically a parent to a giant alien creature. They were allowed into Shade's holding chamber immediately after the verdict. Shade looked up as they entered. All 6 eyes focused on them with obvious concern and question. Danny's voice caught in his throat. He managed to say that Shade was free. The council ruled that Shade was a person, not property. Shade would never go back in a cage again. For a long moment, Shade did not move. Then it made a sound Danny had never heard before. It was a low, keening noise that might have been joy or relief or grief for all the years spent imprisoned. It was the sound of someone who had given up hope suddenly having that hope restored. Shade crossed the distance between them in 2 quick strides. Very carefully, very gently, it wrapped all 4 arms around Danny in an embrace. The hug was tender despite Shade's massive size and strength. Shade spoke with more emotion in its voice than Danny had ever heard. Pack. Always pack. Free with pack. Danny hugged back as much as he could with his much smaller human arms. He said they were family now. Nothing would separate them again. Lisa joined the hug too, wrapping her arms around both Danny and Shade as much as possible. The three of them stood there together in that moment. An unlikely family formed in fire and chaos. A human girl, and the creature the galaxy feared, bonded together by choice and circumstance and something that transcended species. The next weeks were a whirlwind of changes and adjustments for all of them. The Institute provided new quarters for Danny that were large enough for Shade to move around comfortably. It was probably the biggest student residence in the station's entire history. The ceilings were high and the rooms were spacious. Lisa practically moved in with them too. She claimed she needed to document Shade's development for her xenobiology thesis, but really she just wanted to be with her family. Shade proved to be an enthusiastic learner now that it was free. It attended classes when the material was interesting. It particularly enjoyed physics and engineering lectures. The professors were initially nervous about having a Draxian in their classrooms. But Shade was always polite and engaged. It asked good questions when it understood enough to form them. Shade learned to work a datapad once its claws were fitted with special capacitive tips. It could type slowly but accurately. It started keeping digital notes about things it learned. It began writing down thoughts and observations in a journal file that it kept private. Other students were fascinated by Shade. The initial fear faded quickly when they saw how gentle Shade could be. It formed friendships with students from different species. A Filtarian engineering student named Pax became particularly close to Shade. They worked on projects together in the workshop. A Calathian philosophy student would have long discussions with Shade about consciousness and identity, but Shade always remained closest to Danny and Lisa. They were its pack, its chosen family. Shade was never far from them. It walked with them to classes. It studied with them in the library. It joined them for meals in the cafeteria, where it discovered a deep love for human food, particularly spicy dishes that made its eyes water. The media attention was intense for the first month. The story of the human students and their Draxian guardian became a sensation across the galaxy. News services from dozens of worlds wanted interviews. Danny gave several, always being careful with his words. He talked about interspecies understanding and breaking down prejudices. He tried very hard not to say anything that would cause problems later. Through it all, Shade adapted to freedom with remarkable strength and resilience. It explored the station's public areas with wonder in its eyes. Everything was new and interesting after years in a cage. It discovered that it loved human music, particularly old Earth jazz. The complex rhythms and improvisational nature fascinated it. It would listen for hours with its eyes closed and a contented expression. Shade even started experimenting with art. It created sculptures using its 4 hands working in coordination. The pieces were abstract but emotionally powerful. Other students would stop to look at them in the common areas where they were displayed. Some said Shade's art made them feel things they could not put into words. But there were harder moments too. Shade had nightmares sometimes from years of captivity and trauma. It would wake in the night making distress sounds. Danny learned to recognize the signs. He would sit with Shade until the panic passed and Shade remembered it was safe now. Sometimes Shade would react aggressively to perceived threats when there was no real danger. Loud noises could trigger defensive responses. Certain types of enclosed spaces made Shade anxious. They worked through these challenges together with help from the Institute's psychological services. A therapist who specialized in trauma helped Shade develop coping strategies. Progress was slow but steady. Shade learned to recognize when its fear response was disproportionate to actual threat. It developed techniques to calm itself down. Danny and Lisa learned how to help without making Shade feel weak or ashamed. 6 months after the council's decision, Danny found Shade on the observation deck one evening. It was a favorite spot for many students. Large windows looked out at the stars and the gas giant below. Shade often came here to think. Danny joined Shade at the window. He asked what Shade was thinking about. Shade was quiet for a moment before answering. It said one word, home. Danny understood. He asked if Shade meant its original world, the place where it was born. Shade made an affirmative gesture. It spoke more fully now, its vocabulary having expanded greatly. It said it thought about its world often. About its pack from before, about life in the wild before humans came and hunted its people nearly to extinction. Danny asked carefully if Shade wanted to go back, to try to find any survivors of its original pack. Shade was silent for a long time. Its 6 eyes stared out at the infinite darkness between stars. Finally it spoke again. It said its old pack was gone, dead or scattered. The world it remembered no longer existed. Too much time had passed. Too much had changed, but Shade said it had found a new pack here. Danny and Lisa were its pack now. Home was not a place. Home was the people you chose to be with. Pack was home. And Shade's pack was right here on this station. Danny felt emotion tighten his throat. He said Shade was his family too. His brother from another species. His pack member who he would protect just as fiercely as Shade protected him. Shade reached out and placed one large hand on Danny's shoulder. The gesture was affectionate and warm. They stood together looking at the stars, human and Draxian, brothers by choice rather than blood. Lisa found them there an hour later. She was excited about something. She said Professor Vexnor wanted to see them all. There had been a development with the other Draxian specimens that the Institute was reassessing. They hurried to Vexnor's office. The professor looked tired but pleased. He explained that following the Council's mandate, the Institute had been studying the 2 other captive Draxians with new methods. Methods that assumed intelligence rather than assuming mindless animal behavior. The results were remarkable. Both specimens showed clear signs of sapient intelligence. One was male and one was female. Both could learn language with proper teaching. Both demonstrated reasoning and problem-solving abilities. Both had been suffering terribly from years of isolation and captivity. But there was more news. The female Draxian was pregnant. She had been pregnant when captured years ago. The Institute's veterinary staff had not realized because they treated her like an animal, rather than a person. She had carried her offspring through years of captivity, somehow keeping them alive despite the stress and poor conditions. If the offspring showed similar intelligence to their mother and to Shade, it would prove definitively that Draxian sapience was species-wide. It would mean Draxians were people who had been hunted and imprisoned unjustly. It would change everything. Vexnor said the Council wanted Shade's help with the other Draxians. They needed someone who could communicate with them and establish trust. Someone who understood both Draxian nature and galactic society. Would Shade be willing to meet them and help bridge the gap? Shade's reaction was immediate and powerful. All 6 eyes went wide with an emotion Danny had never seen before. It was hope mixed with desperate need. Shade spoke urgently. Others, more like Shade, alive, Lisa confirmed it. 2 others, and soon there would be young ones too. They were Shade's people, Shade's species, maybe even distant relatives from the same region. Shade looked at Danny with a question in its eyes. Danny understood what Shade was asking. It wanted permission to help. It wanted Danny to say this was okay. Danny smiled and said of course Shade should help them. Shade should meet them and talk to them and show them that freedom was possible. These were Shade's people. Shade had a responsibility to them now. Shade made a sound of pure joy. Then it looked at Vexnor and spoke clearly. Yes, help others. Free others, give pack. Teach safe, teach trust, teach free. As they walked toward the research division together, Danny reflected on how much had changed. He came to the stars hoping to prove humanity deserved respect from other species. Instead, he learned something more valuable. Respect was not something you proved or earned through competition. Respect was something you gave freely. It was recognizing the worth and dignity in others even when they were different from you. The beast had broken loose that night 6 months ago. But what really broke was the cage of assumptions, the chains of prejudice, the walls between species that prevented real understanding, and in place of those broken things, something better had grown. Something like friendship across impossible divides, something like family formed by choice rather than biology, something like hope for what the galaxy could become. They reached the secure area where the other Draxians were held. The conditions were better now. The cages were larger and enriched with things to do. But they were still cages, still prisons. Through the transparent wall, Danny could see them. A male Draxian pacing restlessly. A female Draxian curled protectively around her swollen belly. Both looked up as Shade approached. Their eyes went wide with shock and recognition. Shade pressed against the barrier and made sounds Danny had never heard. They were Draxian words, complex vocalizations that human throats could never reproduce, the language of Shade's people speaking to each other for the first time in years. The female Draxian rose and came to the barrier. She and Shade touched hands through the transparent wall. Tears leaked from her eyes. The male joined them. All three Draxians spoke rapidly in their own language. Their reunion was beautiful and heartbreaking at once. Professor Vexnor was already working on getting them released under the same terms as Shade. With three,